What is happening, everybody? It's Saturday afternoon, which means it is time for myself and Millie Maker winner Neil Orfield to break down Week 3's main slate of NFL action. Hopefully, help one of you guys win a Millie Maker and over on FanDuel, not quite $1 million to first place, but nothing wrong with a few $100,000, $500,000 to first place over on FanDuel. And we're going to do our best to help you guys have a big GPP win this week. All we ask from you is that when you come in, you like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, helps keep our content free. And shout out to DraftKings Rainmakers who are sponsoring our show today. If you guys have not played Rainmakers over on DraftKings, go claim a free starters pack. There's a link for that below. It is totally free. So you're not putting any money in to start, and you have a chance to win real cash prizes. So take advantage of that. Click on the link below, claim your starters pack, and then it's going to give you the cards to be able to build out a lineup for this weekend slate. Neil, what is going on? How was your week? All right, he is frozen. He's frozen like Elsa. So there we go. I was like, boy, I must have really stumped him with that question. It was a real hard hitting question that came out of the gate. How are you doing? And he was not prepared for it. So he just left on us. So Neil is gone now. And I guess we could just start breaking down the slate, and then maybe we'll find out how he's doing afterwards. Maybe not. He's back now. Is he frozen? Is he not frozen?
I don't know what happened.
Sure. It's that time of year. Back. Weather starts to get colder. You freeze. I get it.
Exactly. It's cold here in Minnesota. No, I was just saying Thursday Night Football did not go so great for me, but other than that, can't really complain. How you doing?
I was as this happens all the time on Showdown, but I was a 1v1 swap away from having the nuts, which was what I ended up doing as I was building my lineups. Is I started to prioritize Wendell Robinson over Bell when I was doing my final set of lineups. So that was the difference. Is I had the lower owned Wendell Robinson in the spot where Bell was in the optimal lineup.
Brutal.
Actually, I really did like that build. Like, I don't really have any regrets about that, but I ended up going really, really heavy on Wendell Robinson, and he played well. It just so happened to be that somehow Bell had 2 receptions on 1 target, and one of them was a touchdown. Yeah,
that was insane run bad for anybody who did not play Bell in that spot, because did not get incredible usage there. Wendell Robinson, it kind of happened like that. It was sort of what I thought was like the best case scenario for Wendell, was like he's not going to be out there for a ton of snaps, but he's going to be heavily targeted when he is out there. That's kind of what we saw. So that was good to see early on. Who knows if it's going to keep up, if that's going to be like his every week thing, or if he's actually going to like get on the field and be targeted going forward. That'll be interesting to track.
Yeah, I have a feeling he's not going to, because I want to say he played like 9 snaps and was targeted on 6 of them or something.
Right. Probably not going to keep up that rate.
That's probably not going to, but like I was pretty happy with the lineups that I built for Showdown. It's just like you kind of have to have the nuts if you're playing 150 lineups to end up profiting. And I was close, but didn't quite have the nuts. But we have the main slate to talk about here for week 2, Neil. We'll start with quarterbacks where we normally go. And I have a feeling you're going to be very excited to talk about passing games this week, because there's a certain team that projects very, very well for us that I am targeting very heavily. I know it's a team that you hold near and dear to your heart. Do you want to guess who my most rostered quarterback is this weekend?
Yeah, it's going to be Patrick Mahomes. No, obviously it's Kirk Cousins, as it should be. Kirk Cousins, he is the man. Kirko Chain's out there. Gotta love. How do you not like Kirk Cousins? Went from like nobody really liked him in Minnesota, like he was just kind of this really boring dude who just was kind of mediocre at quarterback, to like he is just a fan favorite at this point. He's so fun, and the Vikings haven't even been winning, but he's been fun to watch. Love the new commercials with Kirko Chains, and great. Can't ask for a better matchup than the Chargers. So I'm with you. I'm gonna love Kirk Cousins this weekend.
Yeah, so he is my number 1 most rostered quarterback on DraftKings. FanDuel, he is my 2nd most rostered quarterback. Ironically enough, you did actually guess who my most rostered quarterback is on FanDuel when you said Patrick Mahomes.
Nice.
But there's a pretty tight group of quarterbacks that I really do like for week 3. And a lot of it is shown if you look at the top stacks tool that we have over at Stokastic.com, because we only have 3 teams on the entire slate with double-digit odds being the top scoring stack for fantasy purposes. One of them well above the rest. It's your Minnesota Vikings. We have them with a 19% chance for the top scoring stack on the slate. That's followed by the Dolphins at 11.8%, the Chiefs at 10.7%. Then there's a little drop off where you get to the Chargers at 8.5%. And when I ran my lineups through our sims, those are the quarterbacks that I primarily ended up getting to. A couple of days ago, we had lower top stack odds on the Chargers, and I wasn't getting to quite as much of them. But one thing that, in a weird way, kind of helped them is the absence of Austin Eckler. because now you've got number one, Joshua Kelly, we're going to talk about when we get to running backs, is a cheap piece of the offense to get to. I know he sucked last week, but I'm still going to be wanting to get to him this week. But then also you just get a little bit more condensed target share where instead of Austin Eckler being somebody who's going to absorb targets, you have Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, where we're going to see a lot of the targets really focused on. So with Austin Eckler being ruled out, sure, it's kind of a worse spot for real life purposes for the Chargers, but for fantasy purposes, it's a lot easier to find value and to really figure out who it is we want to roster. So I end up getting more of the Chargers due to that. So with that in mind, those are 4 teams that I'm really building a lot of my lineups around. But pay up quarterbacks, Neil, is Patrick Mahomes your favorite pay up option? Do you not like him as much this week? Or is there a different pay up quarterback that you prefer?
Yeah, it's probably Patrick Mahomes. I mean, it's such a great spot against this Bears defense. Hard to go wrong. He is getting the ownership, though. So that's the one real negative with Patrick Mahomes is getting 11% ownership, projecting for 11% ownership, 11% chance of being the top stack as well against Chicago. I shouldn't say that's the only negative to playing Patrick Mahomes. There's also like you don't really want to pair him with anybody other than potentially Travis Kelce. Kelce wasn't out there for a full snap count last week. I think that he will be this week. I think that was just, he's coming back from injury. So it'll be at least closer to playing, his usual snap count this week. But you don't really want to pair him with anybody else. And also it's a game where the Bears might not be able to keep it close. So I guess there's more than one negative with Patrick Mahomes, but there's a lot of positives too. He is Patrick Mahomes, probably the best quarterback in the NFL, in a great matchup with the Bears. So I think it probably is Patrick Mahomes for me on the high end as well. Josh Allen, I don't love the matchup for Josh Allen. The ownership under 4% projected ownership for Josh Allen is really the reason to have any interest there. Lamar getting over 6% ownership. It's kind of hard to go there with, especially with a lot of his top pass catchers out and Zay Flowers not as involved as maybe we would hope that he would be. So he's a little bit hard to get to. I think that it is pretty clearly Mahomes at the top for me of the elite quarterbacks. I should sort by salary, see if there's anybody else. Cause there is I have some interest in the other side of that game as well. And we have, what is Fields at? 7,100. I don't know if you count him in that tier, but I might consider Fields there as well.
So a couple things about this slate that I think are pertinent, and it applies to what you had just said as well about I'm not getting the Josh Allen very much in the lineups that I've built on DraftKings or FanDuel. DraftKings, he actually isn't making it into neither DraftKings nor FanDuel does he make it into any of my top 150 lineups. Here's a couple reasons for that. Number one, we've got other really good pay up options and quarterback, also a lot of people that look good. Here's something also that's really important, though. We have 2 very, very obvious stud wide receivers that project well above all the other ones, Tyreek Hill and Justin Jefferson. So with that in mind, Stephon Diggs is just not a priority play on this slate. And if Stephon Diggs is somebody who kind of doesn't look great from a projection standpoint, well, then it's kind of hard to reasonably get to Josh Allen as well. So it's sort of these things where I'll look at my exposures after I run my lineups through our sims. And then I'll start to say all right, why is it looking the way it is? And then I kind of think about it, okay, I'm getting all this Justin Jefferson and Tyreek Hill leads to me getting to a lot of Tua and Kirk Cousins. If Diggs is that far down the ladder, it's going to be kind of hard for the sims to look at Josh Allen being optimal for the slate build as well.
Yeah, it's a really tough spot against this Commanders defense. They've been very strong. They're 9th in terms of pass DVOA. It's definitely they're in a tough spot. So it's one of those things with the Bills where it's like that any given week that duo can get there. You can see Diggs and Allen get there. I'm not going to get there a ton. I guess it's a stack that if you want to just jam the chalk at every other position, it will allow you to do so. If you just go to Josh Allen and Diggs, you can basically play chalk everywhere else. So that is the benefit to that lineup. But I mean, they have a sub 25 implied team total for the Bills. Really tough spot, as I said, with the Commanders, and just the other studs being in such incredible spots, particularly Jefferson, that Vikings game, such a great spot that it's really hard to want to play, to click that button for the Bills. But I will say, we do have some positive leverage there for Josh Allen. They still do have nearly a 25 implied team total, even in a bit of a tough matchup, and not many people clicking it. So I don't hate it. It's not my favorite spot in the world because it is a tough matchup. And ultimately the goal of the game is to put up a lot of fantasy points. But I will say 3.7% projected ownership for Josh Allen, 5.3% chance for Buffalo to be the top stack. Like, it's one of those spots where it's like, looking back on it, we might say, why do we not play Josh Allen in this, it's a tough matchup, but why do we not play Josh Allen when everybody else was going to these other stud quarterbacks? Why didn't we pivot there? Because we know it can get there.
And also, you had mentioned that Patrick Mahomes, one thing that can be tricky about him is trying to figure out which pass catch you want to play him with. I do think it's pretty easy to go to Travis Kelce this week. So I just went and looked at my lineups across DraftKings and FanDuel, Neil. I have a total of 50 of my top 300 lineups. So it's 150 on DraftKings, 150 on FanDuel. 50 of those lineups have Patrick Mahomes. Of those 50, how many of them do you think include Travis Kelce of 50 Patrick Mahomes lineups?
Like 48.
Yeah, 49. So when I'm looking at my most optimal lineups, and one part I agree. At one point, I agree with you. It is hard to figure out what wide receiver do I want to pair with Mahomes. And then I look at my exposures, and most of my top Chiefs lineups are Patrick Mahomes single stacked with Travis Kelce.
Yep.
And there's some other guys who are mixed in there at points, but it's primarily just Mahomes to Kelce, which I'm pretty okay with, and that's the way that I have a lot of my Chiefs stacks going. So mentioned that the quarterbacks I'm primarily getting to: Kirk Cousins, Patrick Mahomes, Tua, Justin Herbert. Is there anybody else that you view as being a quarterback that we should be getting a good amount of exposure to on this slate?
Yeah, so I think that you named all of the top quarterbacks. I already mentioned Justin Fields, but he's more of just a off the wall contrarian quarterback. I love the volatility of the spot with Fields has been so bad. Chicago's been so bad. Now Fields comes out and blames the coaching for how bad they've been. I feel like just from like a narrative perspective, I love, but even before like factoring the narrative, I was going to love this matchup with the Chiefs, where the Bears are going to need to do whatever they can to try and keep up with the Chiefs. So I think that, whatever you want to factor in there, I think that it's at least a very interesting spot for Justin Fields. I think he's actually going to be one of my favorite quarterback plays on the slate at sub 1% ownership. He's at 7,100, so the price is about right for Justin Fields. But yeah, I mean, the Bears are going to need to do whatever they can to keep up with this Chiefs team. And I think Justin Fields, love the rushing upside with Justin Fields. It wouldn't shock me to see him just like go all out. He said he wants to play more instinctively. To me, that means he wants to run more, essentially. So I love the spot, even though the Bears have a sub 18 implied team total right now. So that's the downside. Like it's not likely to work out, but we have him at under 1% project ownership. My guess would be Justin Fields comes in above 1%, but like not by a ton. I want to see how it plays out here in Chicago, and I want to be there early on Justin Fields rather than late. After we saw what he did last year, where he broke the slate, 3 weeks in a row late in the season, I think that it could happen earlier in the season. They just need to get back to that magic formula of letting Justin Fields do what Justin Fields is good at and what he wants to do, which is running the football. So yeah, I'm kind of in on Justin Fields as well this week.
And then one other quarterback who I'm getting some exposure to is Dak Prescott. And this is a team, if you're going to make onslaught stacks of one team this weekend, I think the Cowboys are one that makes the most sense. The Cardinals are a team that's really a total disaster. You mentioned the Bears, another disaster. We don't usually have teams this earlier in the year where it's like, looks like they're tanking. And we kind of have that right out of the gate this year in kind of like an NBA sense where, you got the Bears. Some of it too has been due to stuff like, their defensive coordinator is currently getting investigated by the FBI. His house got raided. That's never great.
No.
So there's stuff like that that's definitely contributed to them being a mess. The Cardinals, it seems like the coach they hired, Jonathan Gannon, total dunce, and everything about like last week, they actually looked pretty decent in the first half against the Giants. So part of it was just how bad the Giants look. And then the team just totally falls apart in the second half. So anyway, this Cardinals team is one that I definitely think could just get blown up on any given week. So I have some lineups in here that are like Dak Prescott with 3 of his skill position players. It would be like Tony Pollard, CeeDee Lamb, and then, another guy mixed in, whether it's, let's see, who are some
Ferguson or Gallup or yeah.
Yeah, let me see who some of the ones I ended up getting to. So there's some of Tony Pollard, CeeDee Lamb, some of Gallup, and then, some of Ferguson as well. Ferguson's in about 22.7% of my Dak Prescott lineups there. So that's a team that I like making onslaught stacks of and don't really have a lot of run backs coming back on the other side of. So Prescott in the Cowboys pass game also makes some sense to me, but nothing else is really popping up in anything other than like 2 or 3 lineups or anything like that. Anything else that stands out to you, whether it's at a contrarian and a quarterback or anybody that we haven't pointed out, do you think might be important to your lineups this weekend?
Yeah, I saw somebody in chat pointed out that the Browns are facing a Titans defense that is very much a pass funnel. I did mean to bring them up. I do think it is a great spot, despite how bad Deshaun Watson looks. Like, if he's ever going to have a big game, this feels like a spot where it could happen. I mean, they only have a 21.5 implied team total, so I'm not going to go crazy there, but it is very much a pass funnel defense for the Titans. They give up some big plays. So I don't hate the idea of pairing Deshaun Watson with, you can always go to Amari Cooper, but even like Donovan Peoples-Jones, hope for kind of a long ball there. I kind of like the Browns there. I'd throw them out as a team, as a quarterback, a stack that I would think about playing is Deshaun Watson with one of those pass catchers, or Elijah Moore. I should throw him in there as well. I think they are kind of interesting. It's tough for me with I kind of want to play Goff against the Falcons. The tough spot is he just doesn't run at all. So you'd have to be completely through the air. We got the turf toe issue with Amon-Ra St. Brown, but I still think that that Goff is at the very least in play here. Yeah, I think I would throw out the Raven. I mean, I guess we touched briefly on Lamar Jackson. It's the Ravens have a 26.25 implied team total. Not the best defense there for the Colts. As I said, though, the tough part is like, who do you really want to pair him with outside of Mark Andrews? There's no great other wide receiver options. I don't think I'm going to Nelson Aguilar this week. Maybe you can consider it though. He is somebody you can consider with Lamar. So I'd say those are the quarterbacks. I think we've touched on all the quarterbacks that I'm most interested in playing this week.
All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the running backs. But first, want to let you guys know, we've got a promo going for our NFL lineup generator. And Neil, I know you do a lot of content built around the NFL lineup generator, which we both think is the most beginner-friendly tool that we have over at Stokast.com. For anybody who either just needs help with lineups, or maybe you're new to NFL DFS, maybe you're not profitable at NFL DFS, and you just want a better process for building your lineups, here's the best way to do it. We do it for you. That's what our NFL lineup generator does. You have a couple of things you could select, like whether you want chalky lineups or contrarian lineups. And then for stuff like Showdown, you could also put a game script in. Like maybe you thought the 49ers are going to blow out the Giants. You could set a game script where it's 49ers up, Giants down, and it's going to give you more lineups that are built around, 5-1 49er stacks over the Giants in that kind of scenario. So we have our lineup generator. It's going to build lineups for you. They're lineups that, based on our simulations, are expected to be plus EV. If you don't like a lineup, you could trash it. You could get another one. Up to 20 of them, you could build and save and then upload them to DraftKings and or FanDuel. And when you're signing up for the first time using the promo that we have right now, it's less than $10. Use the link below. There's the promo code REDZONE, but you don't even have to worry about that. It's already preloaded into the link. So just click on that link below, bring you to the page. And for anything, whether you're playing the main slate or any of the Showdown contests, we have it covered in the lineup generator. Time for the running backs, Neil. And I'm just kind of curious, the way that you think your lineups are going to be built this weekend, are you going to be prioritizing the high end of running backs, the mid-range, or the cheaper running backs?
I think primarily mid-range. We've got some really interesting options in the mid-range. I guess it kind of depends how you define it. Like, is Travis Etienne at 6,900? Is he part of the mid-range, or is that high end for you?
Yeah, I consider Etienne the mid-range, and then somebody like Joshua Kelly to be like on the cheap end.
Okay, so if Joshua, I do like Joshua Kelly quite a bit as well. So I was considering him part of the mid-range. I think I'm not going to be, I don't know. It's tough because I think that I like also, like I was going to say, I'm going to be playing a lot of the mid-range because guys we just mentioned, I do like ETN quite a bit. I like Josh Kelly quite a bit, but I think that I'm playing all ranges here because I also really like Tony Pollard, Bijan Robinson. Hard not to have some interest there. So I don't know that I can necessarily say that I'm going to be funneling to one particular type of build. I think that if I were building just one lineup, I probably in my first lineup would be going to mid-range and cheap end. But I do quite like Pollard and Bijan Robinson as well. How about you?
So the way that my lineups are being built right now is really prioritizing the expensive wide receivers, especially Justin Jefferson and Tyreek Hill. I don't know what your stance is on Jalen Waddle. As of a couple of days ago, I was very confident he was not going to play. Now less so. I still think he's a little bit more likely to sit than he is to play. He returned to practice on Friday, but dealing with a concussion and just considering the team he's on, I just don't think the Dolphins are going to fuck around with concussions this year after what happened with Tua last year.
I don't think anybody is.
So, yeah, I agree. I don't think anybody's, but especially the Dolphins. So I was really confident Waddle wasn't going to play this weekend. Now I'm a little more on the fence because he returned to practice, but I'm still kind of building lineups, at least as of now, under the assumption he is going to sit. Now I'm going to have to shuffle things around if that does not end up being the case. But with that in mind, my two most rostered wide receivers are Justin Jefferson and Tyreek Hill. That applies to both DraftKings and FanDuel, which means what? I can't play like Tony Pollard and all of the studs at running back as well, because or else, I'm building lineups like, oh, cool, I used $120,000 worth of salary and I'm double the limit. So I have to prioritize some of the mid-range and cheaper running backs. And that is something that I do think is at our disposal this week. There's a handful of ones that really do stand out to me. One of them being Joshua Kelly. I know he let us down last week. He was chalk. I was on him. He sucked. I should have pivoted more of my lineups to Kylan Williams. Didn't end up doing that. A lot of it was because I was playing golf and not paying attention, which is a shame on me because that news came out 2 minutes before lock. So Joshua Kelly in the mid range. Also, we have Zach Moss as a cheap running back. So we've got Joshua Kelly $5,400 on DraftKings, Zach Moss $5,500. Did you see the Deion Jackson news that broke not all that long ago?
I saw that. Yeah.
Was it like 45 minutes ago or something like that? The Colts are actually releasing Deion Jackson, which make of that what you want and what that means about Jonathan Taylor. I tend to think it means that they're confident they're going to have some sort of agreement with Jonathan Taylor in a couple of weeks when he's eligible to come off the injured reserve. But in the short term, for DFS purposes, Evan Hull's on the injured list. We've got Jonathan Taylor on the injured list. Deion Jackson's cut. Like, Zach Moss just has to play a big role now. So these are my two favorite running backs for this week. And I think Joshua Kelly is going to go a little bit under-owned relative to what he should be just because of the dud he had last week. So my two most exposed running backs, Kelly and Moss, as far as cheaper running backs go, and that really enables me to spend up at wide receiver. You said you like Kelly. Do you also like Moss, or is there another running back in like that 5K-ish range do you think should be included amongst that couple?
I don't think I can do it with Moss this week. I think that I'm going to be underweight to the field. I see he has positive leverage in the boom bust tool, and I most of my decisions are made using the boom bust tool. This is one of the rare spots where I don't think I can get there. This is such a tough spot against this Ravens defense. I'm with you. Like, he's going to have the volume. I'm just not sure that the Colts are going to be able to keep up with the Ravens. I think they're going to end up having to pass more in the second half. And regardless, I just don't think Moss is going to have much efficiency against this Baltimore defense. Of course, he could get there. Like, he could have a couple touchdowns. They could have a pass interference in the end zone. He ends up scoring a couple 1-yard touchdowns. It's a tough spot for Zach Moss. So I think that I would rather, I'm going to funnel more of my lineups to Joshua Kelly in that range. I think that it's just such an easier click for me for Joshua Kelly. Pacheco, I'd rather go to Pacheco as well. I think that there is a chance that Kansas City by the second half has a big lead and is just running the ball out, and Pacheco in a great spot against that Bears defense. So I think that I would prefer to click Pacheco as well. I don't know. So somebody in chat mentioned Gus Edwards. That is such a tough split there for the Baltimore running backs, but Gus Edwards, pretty clearly the goal line guy. So I guess you could go there. I think at 1% ownership, I think that I would actually be more inclined to go to even Gus Edwards than Zach Moss personally. It's a stand that I'm taking a little bit. Man, Javonte Williams at 5,500. I'm debating whether I have interest in Javonte Williams here. The Dolphins are 29th against the rush so far this year. I think that I'd rather click Javonte Williams too. I think that that's pretty interesting to me he's getting 10% ownership. So it's not like he's going completely unowned, but I think that I consider Javonte Williams as well. Even like Miles Sanders, which he's a little bit chalky, but 5,700 Miles Sanders. We have him at 14% projected ownership, 14% chance of being optimal. He's been just a bell cow this year. Like, he's been used. They said all offseason that they think he can be a 3-down back. They want to use him in the passing game, and they've lived up to it. Like, they have been using him how they said they would. So I think that I like Miles Sanders in that kind of range as well. For me, I think that it's going to be largely a Zach Moss fade, just because there are a lot of other running backs that I do like in that range. So I'd rather I'm not going to click the guy that I'm uncomfortable with.
Yeah, and by the way, like, I also have exposure to Miles Sanders, but about even with the field on Sanders. He's projected for some ownership, like you had mentioned. And then where I'm also getting, but the bulk of my exposure in the 5K range is on Joshua Kelly and Zach Moss. And then there's other running backs in the 6K range that I also like, but the expensive range really falls by the wayside for me just because of what I mentioned before. So like, the player I have the most of right now on the high end is Tony Pollard. And that's with him in 14% of my top lineup. So, about close with the field. We have Tony Pollard projected for 12% ownership, I believe. Actually a lot more than that. Tony Pollard at 22% ownership. I think it was on FanDuel that he's projected for 12%. And yeah, that's the case. 13% over on FanDuel. So actually, I'm underweight to the field on Pollard on DraftKings when he's projected for 22% ownership. It's a great spot for him. It's just not where I prefer to spend my salary cap this week. And I prefer to do it at wide receiver. And then also, like you mentioned, guys like ETN, really good play in that 6K range. He's the one I get the most exposure to there. Seemed like you like ETN as well, Neil. But is there anybody else that you're liking in that range in addition to ETN, or is ETN your number one guy? Did Neil just leave, or is my computer bugging out? I never know when these things happen, if it's my computer's fault.
It was me. It was totally my end.
Okay.
I'm back though. You were talking about Tony Pollard being maybe 12% owned on FanDuel is where I lost you.
Okay. Yeah, so I was saying, so Tony Pollard's projected for 13% ownership on FanDuel, but actually 22% on DraftKings. And it's just not a place where I'm choosing to spend my salary cap this week. So prioritizing the cheaper running backs than some guys in the 6K range as well, like ETN, who you had talked about before. So ETN is actually my third most rostered running back on this slate right now, behind Joshua Kelly and Zach Moss. Is ETN your go-to guy in this range around 6K, or is there somebody else that you're also liking in this range? I like to think Neil's just very thoughtful today, because like I ask him the questions, and because he's so stoic in general, Neil Orfield, that I don't know whether he's taking time to think about his questions. I don't know if he's looking at the boom bust tool, the projections. Just pensive, deep in thought. Like he really wants to make sure. So Neil's really, really trying to make sure that he gives us the best running back to roster in the 6K range. So Neil, we're going to get third time's the charm.
Yeah, we're going to get there.
Your go-to guy in the 6K range, or is there somebody else you like here?
Yeah, so apologies for that. It is ETN is going to be my favorite in this range. Houston is such a run funnel defense. He's the most expensive, obviously, getting the most ownership, but I think that it's all fair. It is going to be ETN for me. Man, Gibbs, I just like, you'd think with David Montgomery being out, I think people might assume that Gibbs is going to take on a bigger role, and he probably takes on like a little bit more of a role. But I do think like with his troubles with pass protection, they're just going to go to Craig Reynolds to fill in largely that David Montgomery role. So I'm not sure that that Gibbs's ascendance to being, like a premier back is going to happen all that much quicker because of the David Montgomery. Like, I think that he's going to be used more throughout the year regardless, but I'm not sure that this really makes it happen any faster for Jahmyr Gibbs. So in week 2, despite the great matchup, it's still a little bit of a tough click for me. We do have like really nice positive leverage on Jahmyr Gibbs. I will say, like, I'm more comfortable with the Jahmyr Gibbs ownership than I am with the Zach Moss. I think I'd be more inclined to go to Jahmyr Gibbs in this matchup with Atlanta, where there's at least some possibility that he does take on a significantly larger role here. So my favorite from that range is going to be Travis Etienne. I do have some interest in Jahmyr Gibbs, though. Ramondre Stevenson, did seem to take a little bit more of the workload away from Zeke in week 2, which is promising. I don't know why that wasn't happening already. But I don't know how much I'm actually going to get there. Probably not much against this Jets defense. So yeah, it'd be ETN number 1 for me, followed by Jahmyr Gibbs, most likely in that range.
Yeah, and for me, it's ETN as the number 1 guy. The guy I'm getting to the second most is Jahmyr Gibbs. David Montgomery not expected to play, and I kind of feel like the Lions are just going to be forced to give Gibbs extra touches, the way that we've seen Dan Campbell talk about him and the team as a whole. They used a lot of draft capital on Jahmyr Gibbs, and it seems like they were trying to slowly work him into the offense. But if there's going to be no Montgomery, like, are they going to give Craig Reynolds a bunch of touches? I tend to think not. He's going to be he's going to be on the field. He's going to be getting the second most snaps, I presume. But I think this is going to have to be an increased workload for Jahmyr Gibbs. So he is also somebody I like in the mid-range here. Anything else at running back that's a priority to you, Neil?
So I'd say Kenneth Walker, just another name in that range because of the great matchup and the elite usage for Kenneth Walker so far. Got to at least throw that name out there. He's 6,200 going up against Carolina. We do have him at 13% projected ownership, so not like he's a slam play, but I'd throw him in there as well in that range. Just scrolling down to the cheap guys. There wasn't a lot that I love as far as cheap guys this week. I don't think that there's anybody else that's going to be a huge. Oh, I didn't mention Alexander Mattison. So Alexander Mattison, only 5,800. People are getting there. We haven't projected for a little bit over 11% ownership, but I don't think that we are expecting Cam Akers to play this week. Even if Cam Akers were active, like, I actually might have preferred that because I think it would have driven down the ownership on Alexander Mattison a bit. Kevin O'Connell saying that Alexander Madison's still the lead back for the Vikings. I think that he's going to get the volume this week at the very least. He's 5,800 in one of the best spots you can ask for a running back. So even though, honestly, I'm not a huge believer in the talent for Alexander Madison, I just believe in the volume, the matchup. I think the ownership is not as high as it probably should be. So I do like Alexander Mattison as well.
Yeah, I'm getting to some exposure of Madison, less than 10% though. And it's somebody who I know he's been massively inefficient this year, but the team is still jamming him out on the field. Like, he's still getting the bulk of the snaps, still getting the carries. And we saw in best ball in the offseason, a lot of people thought that Chandler was going to end up being somebody who could overtake Madison as the running back, and clearly do not feel that way because as poorly as Madison has played, inefficient, dropping passes, fumbling the football, they're still running him out there nearly every single play on pretty much any kind of situation. Like he's in there in passing downs as well. We've seen him targeted in the passing game. He's been better as a fantasy asset in the past, especially in some of those games that Dalvin Cook has missed. It can't get worse for Madison.
Right.
And it seems like they're committed to continue giving him the role. They put out a statement that he's still going to be their go-to back, even though Cam Akers is in the mix. We'll see. I'm sure if he continues to struggle and Cam Akers looks good as the backup, the roles will flip, but not an issue for this week. Cam Akers not expected to play. So Madison, I think one more week with an opportunity for an upside. And because I'm getting Vikings exposure, he's in my player pool, but not like a crazy amount of exposure or anything.
Yeah, I feel like this is my favorite type of spot where a player has been struggling for a couple weeks, like really, really bad. So people are going to be off him a little bit more than they should be, and it's a great matchup. But as I said, like we do have him projected for over 11% ownership. So I would love him if he was coming in at like 3% ownership. I'd probably have 50% Alexander Madison. But since he's getting 11% ownership, I anticipate that I'll be actually a little bit above weight to the field, but I'm not going like 50% either.
Anything else you want to talk about at running back? If not, we'll go to the pass catchers.
No, I think that we've covered all of the running backs that I have. Tony Jones, 4,500 in a fine spot with Green Bay. Not a very talented. I guess I just saw the name and thought maybe I should mention Tony Jones just because he's 4,500. You could consider him, but I don't have any love for it. We actually, Craig Reynolds, interesting. We have him at 3% projected ownership, 6% chance of being optimal. So, I am anticipating Craig Reynolds to take on largely that David Montgomery role, maybe not to the full extent. So at 4,400 against Atlanta, I guess he is somewhat in play as well. But no, I think we've covered all of the running backs I'm most interested in.
Yeah, we have Tony Jones expected to start. We have Kendre Miller expected to get touches behind him. And then we also have Adam Prentice expected to get a few snaps for the Saints at running back as well. And that doesn't include the fact that Taysom Hill is also going to end up getting snaps. So I'm just warning you, anybody who goes out and decides that you're going to invest heavily in like Tony Jones or Kendre Miller, it's going to be very difficult to predict which of the two of them is going to get the bulk of the carries. And one of them might end up playing decently and then they're going to get vultured by Taysom Hill and you're going to want to throw yourself out a window. So it's a really difficult Saints situation to figure out, especially when you consider that Kendre Miller's yet to make his season debut. He's dealing with an injury. How limited is he going to be? So it's a situation that I am not getting exposure to as of now. Maybe it'll change if we find like some definitive reporting that like so-and-so, maybe it's, Miller is like looking great in practice and he's 100%. He's going to be a workhorse. Like if we were to see that as a report from Adam Schefter, that could change my opinion, but I don't expect that to be the case. So not a situation that I'm really targeting. As we go ahead and talk about the wide receivers here, Neil, I've really tipped my hand. I'm prioritizing spending up at wide receiver. My two most rostered players at the position are Justin Jefferson and Tyreek Hill. And the Tyreek Hill is definitely a little bit more flimsy because my exposure to him will come down if Jalen Waddle ends up playing. But like I said before, my current expectation is that Waddle does not end up playing. For you, are you also prioritizing spending up at wideout?
Yeah, I mean, I love Justin Jefferson here. Obviously, I'm going to want to play a ton of J Jets in this primo matchup. He's already got 20 receptions through 2 games. Just been an absolute beast. And now he's got a great matchup with the Chargers. The only downside to Justin Jefferson is the ownership. We've got him at about 25% ownership. We have him optimal 22% of the time, I guess, and the price tag, we can throw that in there as well. But outside of those issues, like you can't ask for a better receiver or a better spot. So Justin Jefferson, clearly the likeliest to have a big game here. So yeah, I can't argue with you there. Tyreek Hill, as you said, like I do feel like it's a little bit flimsier. We've still got him at 19% ownership. Doesn't have a great matchup, so like that's the biggest issue with Tyreek Hill. I guess there is a possibility that Jalen Waddle is out. I think that as you said, probably likelier that Jalen Waddle is out. So there is some reason to play more Tyreek Hill, but I think that he's kind of the number one receiver anyway. So I don't know how much more gets funneled to him if Waddle is out, but yeah, the matchup with the Broncos, not as bad as like the Broncos haven't been as good as maybe we were anticipating coming in. They're actually so far this year 28th in terms of past DVOA. The Dolphins do have over 27 implied team total. So I don't know. I think that there's going to be some regression to this Broncos defense being a little bit better against the pass throughout the year. I think that this is going to end up being a neutral to bad matchup for wide receivers. But so far they've been bad against receivers. Maybe that does continue. And as I said, the Dolphins have an over 27 implied team total. So Maybe I'm wrong about this being a tough spot for Tyreek Hill, but I certainly prefer the matchup for Justin Jefferson over the matchup for Tyreek Hill against Patrick Surtain. Diggs, we talked about it earlier when we were talking about Josh Allen, that Diggs is just a tough spot, but we could end up feeling stupid if we don't play any of the Allen Diggs combo. It's a combo that can always put up a huge score. So Diggs at 10% ownership, we've only got him optimal 7% of the time. I feel I'll feel less stupid because of the 10% ownership on Stephon Diggs. I think that he is coming in a little bit over owned currently in our projections. So maybe it's just a spot that I just won't get there at all to the Josh Allen and Diggs combo when Diggs is coming in at 10% ownership. And then I do want to say Amon-Ra St. Brown. I feel like people are kind of scared off by the toe a little bit, but if he's out there in this matchup with Atlanta, I think I'm actually going to go to some Amon-Ra St. Brown. We've only got him at 8% projected ownership right now. Falcons I think the defense has been better than expected coming in, but 20th in terms of pass DVOA so far. The Lions do have a near 25 implied team total, so kind of interested there as well.
Yeah, I'm getting to Stephon Diggs in just 3% of lineups. I'm on St. Brown in only 2% of lineups. If we're looking down at the elite wide receivers who are not quite as expensive as the Justin Jefferson and Tyreek Hill tier, the two that I'm getting to the most are CeeDee Lamb and Keenan Allen. CeeDee Lamb, I mentioned before that Dak Prescott was like the 5th quarterback that I was getting to, just past some of those other stud quarterbacks. Another thing too about the Cowboys, they're going to play in a game where they don't win by like 40 points. It's going to happen one of these weeks. And when it happens, they're going to be a little bit more reliant on Dak Prescott and the passing game. Prescott's played really well this year. Almost all of his deep balls have been going to CeeDee Lamb to this point. Like CeeDee Lamb has had a massive target share for this team. When you consider that they haven't really had to throw the ball all that often, because they win week 1, 40-0 over the Giants. Week 2, they win 30-10 over the Jets. Yes, very easy strength of schedule. Guess what? They draw the Cardinals this week. But still, it's not like they're favored by 21 or 30 points in this game. They're still favored by 12 points. It's expected to be relatively competitive. If that is the case, I do think there's a little bit more upside in this Cowboys passing game than people realize, which is why I come in a little bit overweight to the field on Dak Prescott. And I think CeeDee Lamb at only 13% ownership is a good guy to target on like the elite, but like not quite super expensive end of this range. So I found myself getting overweight to the field on CeeDee Lamb. 13 targets last week, caught 11 of them for 143 yards. And this does figure to be a game where the Cowboys are going to have to throw the ball more than they've had to in each of the last couple of weeks. So CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott, that is a combination that I like. And this is my favorite pass catcher, CeeDee Lamb, of the not Tyreek Hill and Justin Jefferson guys. And then also have some exposure to Keenan Allen as a run back in the Viking stacks that I'm getting to. 7K range for you, Neil. Anything that you are prioritizing?
Not really. And I guess Keenan Allen would be my biggest priority in the 7K. I already mentioned Amon-Ra St. Brown. So outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown, I mean, Keenan Allen, like in that great matchup, everybody's going to be there. Everybody's going to be playing this Vikings Chargers game. So we've got him projected for 21% ownership, looking a little bit over owned in the tools. But I think you can certainly get to Keenan Allen. Like that game just has huge fireworks potential. Don't really know that I love Calvin Ridley here. We do have Zay Jones out, so that's a little bit, but I think that benefits Christian Kirk probably more than Calvin Ridley. And Houston is such a run funnel defense that I don't think that I'm going to get to a ton of Calvin Ridley. Chris Olave seems fine at 7,000. The price is about right, but not somebody that really stands out to me. So yeah, in the 7K range, I think that I would rank it. Amon-Ra, when you factor in ownership, would be the player that I'm most interested in. After Amon-Ra, it is probably Keenan Allen for me, and then CeeDee Lamb third for me, just because like I think that it is a spot where like they're probably going to be running the ball more against Arizona. I like they have a nearly 28 implied team total, so don't get me wrong, I still like CeeDee Lamb, but I think that it's a matchup where they don't necessarily need to be chucking it the whole game.
One thing that's funny bringing up Calvin Ridley, and I'll tie this into Rainmakers, the sponsor of our show. If you guys want to get a free starters pack, click on the link below. You're going to get a pack to build out an entire lineup for the week 3 slate. And those cards are good for the entirety of the season as well. Free pack, you can win real cash prizes with it. So we were talking last week about Calvin Ridley and how I felt like people might a little bit be overreacting to his week 1 performance. People just putting him all of a sudden amongst the likes of Justin Jefferson and Tyreek Hill, where he was getting comparable ownership to those kind of stud receivers. And the same thing went for Rainmakers, Neil, where last week, at the time the game started, the most expensive wide receiver on the secondary market was Calvin Ridley. He was more expensive than anybody. His prices this week are less than half of what they were a week ago. It just goes to show how much people will overreact to individual performances. Like last week, I felt Ridley was probably too expensive. This week, he's a little bit too cheap. And I didn't play Ridley last week in DFS, and he's not really making it into my lineups this week either. And then once I get to the next group of wide receivers, like I'm not playing very much in the 6K range other than Mike Williams. He's making it into some lineups, but like anywhere from $5,500 to $7,500. The only player I have double-digit exposure to is Mike Williams. Like nobody else is even really remotely close.
Yeah, man. I did not realize how much the route participation had dropped for Calvin Ridley. He only ran routes on 74% of dropbacks last week. I didn't anticipate that. Like, I don't know what happened there. It was 97% in week one. So pretty interesting to see Calvin Ridley drop that much in terms of route participation. I'm still a believer in the talent for Calvin Ridley, and I'm still a believer in the talent for Trevor Lawrence. So I'm still in most weeks. I just think this is a little bit of a tough spot there for Ridley against a run funnel like Houston.
Yeah, and hey, like people are bringing up in the chat, Benny Levine saying maybe he faded himself. Yeah, investigate that guy's bet history. What did he do? Yeah. Did he maybe bet himself for under 6.5 receptions? I think that was the line last week. So we know that Calvin Ridley's big into the betting streets. The reason he had to sit out all of last game is because he placed like a couple $100 bets on the Falcons. Cost himself a lot of, maybe the worst bet he's ever made for multiple reasons. Number one, he bet on the Falcons. So that's clearly negative EV last year. Right. But then he compounds it with the fact that like he bet a couple $100. That's right. If I remember correctly, like I think the biggest bet he made was like $1,000. But like in general, he was not wagering very much. And he bet. I've never seen this, but I've never seen somebody bet like $500 to lose 10 million. I've never seen that kind of payout before.
Might be the worst bet in history. Yeah, good point.
It probably is. And it was all of that to bet on the Falcons, who were not winning games last year anyway. Either way, if I get into this mid-range, it's really a dead zone for me. I like Mike Williams at 6K. He makes a lot of sense in those Viking stacks. He's much more cost-effective run back than Keenan Allen is. Joshua Kelly is also a good cost-effective running back when we talk about the running back positions. Anything that you're seeing in this mid-range of wide receiver, you're kind of shaking your head as if you were agreeing with me that nothing really stands out. Mike Williams, somebody that also appeals to you, or anybody else standing out?
Yeah, definitely with you on Mike Williams. I think that the couple, it's been Keenan Allen outplaying him pretty clearly so far, but Mike Williams is 6,000, still has that big play potential. So I love Mike Williams in this matchup with the Vikings. 100% with you there. I do think Amari Cooper, I mentioned Deshaun Watson as somebody that you could play against this Tennessee pass funnel defense. Amari Cooper is probably going to be my primary pair-in with Deshaun Watson. So I think that Amari Cooper kind of interesting, and you can play him without Deshaun Watson too against this defense. DJ Moore, I did mention that I'm going to be playing some Justin Fields. Primarily, I'm going to be stacking Fields with DJ Moore. I think Fields himself is low owned enough that you can just pair him with his top pass catcher, especially when the pass catcher is coming in at 2% ownership. So I do have interest in the Fields Moore pairing. Jordan Addison, I think, we saw his route participation jump in week 2. I think it'll continue to increase throughout the year. And he's also in that primo matchup against the Chargers and only coming in at 7% ownership. We've only got him optimal 5% of the time. So doesn't look incredible in the tools, but I do think Jordan Addison very much in play in this matchup. Christian Kirk getting some ownership. Like, as I said, the Zay Flowers being out definitely helps Christian Kirk. But at the same time, still in that run funnel game against Houston. So not necessarily going to get there. A lot of people have brought up Houston. What do you think you're going to get to any CJ Stroud stacks or any of his receivers as one-offs?
I mean, any is relative because I have two lineups with him right now on, let's see. So I have 2 lineups with him on DraftKings of my top 150 and none on FanDuel. More or less, the answer is no. So the answer on CJ Stroud is no. As far as the wide receivers, I do have some exposure to Tank Dell, who drew 10 targets last week. 10 targets, caught 7 of them for 72 yards and a touchdown. He remains really cheap at $3,600. So full Texan stacks, no. But Tank Dell is somebody I'm getting to as a cheap pass catcher. So there's only 2 cheap pass catchers that I have double-digit exposure to, Neil. One of them is Tank Dell. The other one, would you like to take a guess? By the way, we're going to say as a price point of, let's go with anything below 5. So anything below 5,000. I have 2 wide receivers with double-digit exposure. One of them is Tank Dell. Who do you think the other one might be?
Below 5,000. I would guess KJ Osborne.
You are correct. It is KJ Osborne. I think a lot of people are going to want to play Jordan Addison for reasonable reasons. He's shown big play upside. He's looked really good so far to this point, but look at the difference in price between these two. The ownership is about the same. Look at the difference in price and then also how often they're being utilized. We have seen so far through 2 games, 11 targets go to KJ Osborne, and we've seen 12 targets go to KJ Osborne, 11 targets go to Jordan Addison. These are 2 wide receivers that are being used fairly similarly. They're on the field about the same amount, but the one thing that's different here is that KJ Osborne is $1,500 less expensive. He's also lesser owned of the two, not by a significant amount, but he still is lower owned of the 2 wide receivers. If I'm making Viking stacks and I'm doing a double stack, I'm much more apt to go to KJ Osborne, especially because it's really hard to go, Justin Jefferson and then also Jordan Addison with Kirk Cousins. You have to be like a little bit more cost conscious than that. But I do feel like unless Jordan Addison is all of a sudden going to start playing more snaps than he's already playing or get targeted more, he's a little bit overpriced for what his role has been to this point. There's clear big play upside because we've seen it. But KJ Osborne, I think, really might be the number 2 wide receiver right now, as opposed to Jordan Addison, and they're not priced that way.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. I mentioned that I have some interest in Jordan Addison under the assumption that he's going to continue to pick up more of a role. So he played, more snaps, ran more routes in week 2 than week 1. So I think Jordan Addison, there's some possibility that he keeps increasing. But as you said, like KJ Osborne has been playing more than Jordan Addison, and he's 4,000. So yeah, he's coming in at under 6% ownership. We've got him optimal 10% of the time. Hard not to love KJ Osborne. My guess is that he ends up a little bit higher owned than the 5.5% we have him at, in part because Sims are taking over the world and people are going to get the same thing that we're getting using the Sims tool. But I think that he's going to be a fantastic play as long as he's below 10% ownership. Yeah, KJ Osborne, very interesting to me. I'm with you there.
Yeah, so those are my cheap guys. I'm getting to KJ Osborne and Tank Dell. Anybody else on the cheap end that you like getting to?
Yeah, Tank Dell, I do want to say, I do think that he's at the very least interesting. I think this Jaguars defense is legit, but he's cheap enough and it has a big enough role and has the splash play potential that I think he's in play. One guy that I've been out on, like basically his entire career, is Drake London. I got to say that this is kind of an enticing matchup. He's 5,000 here against Detroit, 8% projected ownership, 12% chance we have for being optimal. So I think I might buy in a little bit on Drake London. This might be the rare week that I'm in on Drake London because of the price tag and the matchup. Kind of interesting there. I think JSN like picks up a bigger role throughout the year. I guess there's some possibility that. I don't know what the latest is on DK Metcalf. I've been assuming that he's in. I think that he's likely to play, but man, JSN at 1% ownership against Carolina at 4,300 just stands out a little bit to me. Just looking at the name, the price, and the ownership as a play that I could consider playing some JSN. I think I need to look into it a little bit more to see whether is a name that I'm really going to be playing. I've seen some speculation that Justin Watson might have a big week here. He's been out there for the Chiefs. He's a guy that nobody wants to collect, never sexy. I don't really know if he has 2-3 touchdown potential, but 1 touchdown for 80 yards for Justin Watson, I think is in play here. I think we've named all of the cheap guys that I'm the most interested in.
Yeah, I would need for Jackson Smith and Jigbo to end up being somebody I roster. It would need to be DK Metcalf doesn't play. He's officially questionable on the injury report, dealing with a rib injury, but he did practice in full on Friday. It's not even like a partial practice, a full practice. So I feel fairly confident that DK Metcalf is going to play. I would feel differently if he's ruled out. Then guys like Tyler Lockett and Jackson Smith and Jigbo would certainly look better. I just don't expect that to be the case as of now. So let's go ahead and check out the tight ends. And yeah, as Mike Lawrence, our wonderful producer, just threw into the chat, if you guys want to sign up for our NFL package, it includes everything: ownership projections, player projections, and then also stuff like our top stacks tool, which I know Neil uses, as well as the boom bust tool. And then our contest generators, so you build your lineups on our site. And then also the Sims tool, so you could simulate those lineups. It's all included in our football package. There's links below to sign up for that. Tight end, Neil, I do not have very much exposure to different guys at the tight end position. If I'm paying up, I'm going to Travis Kelce. If I'm paying down right now, it is Durham Smythe. With that said, Smythe is kind of contingent on Jalen Waddle being out. So if Waddle ends up sitting, I think Smythe looks like a great cheap tight end at only $2,900 on DraftKings. And on FanDuel, Smythe is $4,800. So I'm going cheap, it's to Smythe. If I'm paying up, it's Kelsey. Those are the only two tight ends that I have double-digit exposure to. Everything else is like pretty spread out. Some guys that might correlate with a quarterback I'm rostering. So like I have some exposure to TJ Hawkinson. I have a couple of Zach Ertz lineups as a run back in Dak Prescott lineups, but nothing crazy. It's really Smythe and Kelsey for me tight end right now.
Yeah, honestly, I don't see any tight ends that are really standing. I mean, TJ Hawkinson, we have him at 9% ownership. So I think I might throw him in that bucket. He clearly, the price tag has come all the way up to 6,500 for TJ Hawkinson, but he's also in a fantastic matchup with the Chargers. So I think that I'm probably going to end up with double digit exposure to TJ Hawkinson as well. We've got him, as I said, 9% projected ownership, 11% chance to be an optimal. The price might actually keep the ownership in check for TJ Hawkinson, but he's been a target machine on the Vikings. He's got a great matchup with the Chargers. So I might throw him into that group as well. I don't think that I'm going to end up with double-digit exposure to Mark Andrews. I think I'm going to have Andrews primarily with Lamar Jackson. I don't know that I'm going to be doing a ton of naked Mark Andrews here. Njoku has been kind of disappointing so far, but 1.5% ownership, 5% chance to be an optimal. I throw him out as a name that I'm somewhat interested in. If you are going to go with me on the Justin Fields, I'm probably only single stacking Fields, but it's possible I do some single stacks with Cole Kmet with Fields as well. Hunter Henry has been so involved so far. He's at least interested at 4,100. I cannot believe that we're not even talking about the 3,900 Kyle Pitts against Detroit. He's not even a name that pops out anymore at 3,900. He's like any other tight end at this point. It's sad to see the downfall of Kyle Pitts here, but he really doesn't stand out even at 3,900. I'll probably have some, but yeah, I think I'm with you. The only tight ends that I think I'm going to get to double-digit exposure, Kelsey, Hawkinson. Maybe I get there with Smythe. He is at the very least running. He's out there every play running a ton of routes. So even with TJ Waddle in, I could see myself getting to some Smythe. I don't know that it'd be double-digit exposure. One name that I wanted to throw out there to you, since we talked about him earlier when we were talking about running backs, any interest in a $3,300 Taysom Hill?
No. I have him in 0 lineups on DraftKings. I have him in 0 lineups on FanDuel. Not somebody I'm getting to at the tight end position. I will say I'm going to have some of my ownership freed up at tight end if Jalen Waddle plays, because then just my exposure to Durham Smythe is going to have to come down. He's my second most rostered tight end behind Travis Kelce. But I don't presume that means it's going to go to Taysom Hill. I think it will be guys like more of TJ. If I had to guess, if there is no Durham Smythe, I would probably end up with double-digit exposure to Sam Laporta and TJ Hawkinson. Those are the two guys that I think would raise the most in my ownership.
I think because of the matchup with Green Bay, I think I actually am going to get to some Taysom. I'm not going to get double digit. I don't think of Taysom, but he's going to be in my player pool because of the lack of ownership and because I think that he does get some of those running back looks and potentially at the goal line. I think that I'm he's one of those kind of off the wall plays that doesn't stand out as a great play, doesn't look great in the tools, but would it shock any of us if Taysom vultures a couple touchdowns at the goal line? Wouldn't shock me. So I think that I'm maybe a little bit more interested than you are in Taysom. But yeah, I'm usually pretty spread out at tight end. I think I'm going to be pretty spread out at tight end once again today, with the exception of Kelsey and Hawkinson. For me are the two that I'm pretty confident I'm going to get to double-digit exposure. From there, I'm not sure if anybody else makes it to 10%.
Yeah, is Durham Smythe somebody you assume you're going to end up playing a good amount of as well if Waddle doesn't play?
Not necessarily. I think that I'm going to get to some. I don't know that I'm going to get to 10% plus. I get it. He's out there on the field plenty. The Dolphins have one of the highest implied team totals. My guess would be that yes, I get to 10% plus of Durham Smythe. I'm just not 100% sure yet at this. He's not something that I'm forcing into my lineups. I think that I'm going to get there just based on projection and price. But he's not somebody that I'm if I'm not getting to at least 10% of Kelsey and Hawkinson, I'm going to force my way up to it. Whereas Smythe, it'll probably happen naturally, but I'm not going to force it.
And if you guys are looking to place bets for any of the football games, go check out Odd Shopper. We now have it totally locked and loaded with all football markets. We've got lots of different options. I've had a really good, profitable start to the football season as far as betting goes. And it's because of the tools and data we have at Odd Shopper. It's really easy to use. And if you sign up now for the first time using the link we have below, you're going to get 70% off the first month you sign up for. And it is something that is going to pay for itself. I know from myself using it this year, I know that I've had about a 4% ROI on all the bets I've placed from OddsShopper, and I've placed thousands of bets this year using our data and tools there. So sign up, use that link to get 70% off. It is something that long-term, I think the tool does pay for itself with profitable EV bets. So Neil, time to close out the show. You know what's coming. Favorite stack of the week. If you were only playing one lineup in a large field tournament, what quarterback and pass catchers and potentially run back option would you be going to in that one lineup?
I want to be contrarian here, so I'm going to go straight to. I've talked about it a lot throughout the show. I'm going to go to that Fields Moore pairing. How about you?
All right, you're going with Justin Fields to DJ Moore. Well, I'm going to go with my most rostered stack on the slate then, which is Kirk Cousins to Justin Jefferson. I mentioned liking KJ Osborne before as well. So with that in mind, I'm going to go with a Kirk Cousins double stack, Justin Jefferson to KJ Osborne, and then running it back with Mike Williams. That's a stack that I'm going to be playing a bunch this week. I know the field is going to be doing it a whole bunch as well, but still makes sense to me. Also, I should add in that you could go Joshua Kelly at running back as well, as opposed, or with Mike Williams, and you go with a full game stack there. I think it makes a whole lot of sense. It's a great game to target. The total is super high, and I think it's for very reasonable reasons, especially because I'll close out with this, Neil. Do you know what the run percentage has been for the Vikings so far this year?
Very low. I know that, but I don't know what the actual percentage is.
22%. They are throwing the ball on 78% of their plays, which means a couple of things. A lot of upside for the passing game and very fast-paced games with a lot of points being scored. So I think we could see the same thing from the Chargers as well with no Austin Eckler out there. Kelly's going to be more involved in the passing game, I think, this week. But still, I think it's a really good game to target. Not any kind of contrarian take there because I know the field is getting there. But I still am going to be overweight to that spot. I think it makes a whole lot of sense. Guys, thank you very much for watching. If you've not done yet, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Good luck in week 3, and check out all Neil's content tomorrow. He's going to be on Live Before Lock for NFL, as well as Showdown Live Before Lock. So you get a full day of Neil covering all the slates tomorrow. So check him out tomorrow. Good luck, guys. See you next week.